By the way, like, the word girlies is a gender neutral term, and I say that because if you think about the messiest girl you know, it's a man. Emotional abuse is very nuanced and very layered because it can make you think that you are responsible for your abuse. Because everybody understand that Romeo and Juliet is a play. It's not like, it didn't happen. It's not an account of history. It's not an account of real life events. It is the figment of somebody's imagination. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to yet another episode of It's That Deep, the podcast. I am your host. My name is Feyisara, and this is the podcast where everything is that deep. And I believe we are on episode 18 already. I want to say 18. I may be wrong there, but wow. I cannot believe it's been almost 20 weeks of making a podcast. That is crazy. Big up me. The year is really running. 2024 is really speeding ahead. I don't know what, it's got bills to pay. I don't know where it's off to. Really running ahead. But nevertheless, this has been a very interesting week in the world. Interesting things have been happening. But to be honest with you guys, I'm trying to find a balance between, like, I don't really want to be online all the, like, I don't want to be, I've said this many a time, but I don't really want to be consuming a lot. And I actually struggle a bit, and I find some difficulty in, like, you kind of have to have your finger on the pulse. You kind of have to know what's going on for the purposes of this podcast and just for life. It's good to be well informed. However, I'm like, I'm really tired of just, like, scrolling. Is it just me? Like, I'm just tired of scrolling all the time and consuming information all the time and consuming dumb opinions all the time. So I am struggling a bit, with striking that balance. Nonetheless, like I said, it's been an interesting week. Yesterday, or my yesterday at least, OJ Simpson died. And my mouth was open when I got the alert to my phone. And I don't know why my mouth was open, because well, actually, question, because I was just of the assumption that we all knew that he did that. Like, he absolutely did unalive that woman. Like, I just kind of thought that was the general consensus. And so, in my books, he's not the best person in the world, but his legacy and the trial and just what it did for culture, I kind of wanted to roll my eyes there. But just what it did, like, what an interesting story. Really interesting story. And there's been other things happening this week, which we will get into. But yeah, welcome back to another episode, and I think we should just go ahead and do the honorable picks, right? Okay, so our first honorable pick, and I kind of do this one with a bit of regret, I can't lie. Maybe it's me, maybe I am bad vibes, maybe I am the problem and I'm the drama, but I just feel like every time I talk about the church on this podcast is not positive. It's very not good, and maybe I'm the drama, I don't know. But I want to talk about Matt Pilavachi and Soul Survivor, because this week Matt Redman, so again, for those who don't know, Matt Redman is, like, I wouldn't call him a superstar because he just doesn't give me those vibes. He doesn't give me somebody who seeks, like, fame in that way, but he is the writer of some of the last 2 decades most popular gospel songs, or I wouldn't call it gospel. Would I call it gospel? Like CCM, Christian contemporary music. He has authored some of the most beautiful worship songs in the last 2 decades. And he is a pastor, I believe. But he and his wife released a documentary this week about their experiences serving under and being in the proximity of Mike Pilavachi, who was also a pastor. He was he's not dead, by the way. He's just no longer in these positions. But he was a, like, Christian evangelist and the founder of this, like, worship movement called Soul Survivor, which was, I don't know if Soul Survivor actually still exists, I'm not actually sure, but it was massive back in the day. I wasn't too familiar with it because I grew up white garment, and that is as African as you can get, so I'm still not too familiar with, like, what I consider to be more Western expressions of worship. But when I went to uni, and there was no white garment in uni, so everything, like, that from uni, everything changed. I became familiar with Soul Survivor, and it was like everybody knew about them, and they were like the go-to worship movement. But anyway, so yeah, he led that, and a couple years ago he was exposed. I'm telling you guys, listen, exposure is happening, Sha. But he was exposed for just terrible behavior, like sexual misconduct, sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, narcissism, bullying, just everything that seems to be the vice of these men of God who fall from grace. And so that is what the documentary, details. I'll put it in the link below. And yeah, I just thought I'd share some of my thoughts on it, because again, like I said, maybe it's me that's bad vibes, but it seems that this is such a commonplace occurrence. It's actually quite disheartening that like every time the church makes somewhat global news, it's always for something very negative and very not of God. So yeah, the documentary came out, and I just think, well, first of all, power to these people, because I imagine it can't be easy to share like what is years of abuse at the hands of somebody who has been revered in the Church of, I think it was COV, I think it was Church of England, but like it can't be easy to do that. There's definitely going to be backlash. There's definitely going to be people that come and yappa with their mouths. I really appreciate that the documentary touched on the nuance of abuse, because I think sometimes people really associate abuse, not solely, but for the most part, with sexual abuse. And of course, that is a very big, facet to this story. They were like recounting how Mike Pilavachi used to have particularly young men come to his home and live in with him. And like he would offer them massages, and obviously like you can't say no, it's Mike Pilavachi. Also, something that just came to mind as I was speaking, he didn't have a wife. And they opened the documentary saying that he doesn't have, or to their knowledge, having been with him and served under him for however many years, he doesn't have any leadership or any accountability. Those two things, just be very careful here, Feyisara. But those two things I find to be really interesting and somewhat of a pattern in particularly men of God, in quotation marks, who fall in this manner. They're missing a spouse and they're missing accountability. And I said it last week, your mentor or your accountability cannot be somebody who lives across the pond. It does not make any sense. But I find that really interesting. Anyway, I digress. So although sexual abuse is a very large facet of this story, I really appreciate that the couple shared emotional abuse and financial abuse and other forms of abuse, because I think sometimes we focus on what is more apparent to the eye, and we forget that those other forms of abuse are still just as powerful and just as dangerous. I really love that they touched on emotional abuse and the fact that, like, one day you were in Mike's good graces and then the next day you were like iced out and on an island. And it's like I watched it and I just chuckled to myself, because I've had that same experience where it's like somebody, one day is great and we're a family and we're a team, and then the next day it's like WhatsApp group chat shut down, everybody's kicked out, and you're getting the silent treatment when you walk into church. Like, I've experienced that, and so I appreciate that they did that. I really appreciate that. I think that's important, because again, with sexual abuse, it's so easy to point the finger, and you have an aggressor. You know what I mean? You have almost like you have fault personified in this person, because you're not sexually abusing yourself. But with emotional abuse, it can be a thing where it's like you begin to blame yourself, and you're like, yo, did I do something? What did I do that has made this person ice me out, or made this person kick me out of the WhatsApp group, or made this person walk past me like they don't know me from Adam? Like, emotional abuse is very nuanced and very layered, because it can make you think that you are responsible for your abuse. And so I really love that they touched on that. I think my main takeaway just in watching it, again, I think not being overly familiar with Soul Survivor helps me to be more objective, but I cannot come off of this conclusion that the church is being run like a business these days. And it is, what is it? it's just disturbing, I think is the word. And I think there's a couple things in that. It's like I said last week, like men and women of God are products these days that we consume. So we go to their, worship events, we listen to their worship sets, we listen to their sermons, we buy their books. They are products that we effectively consume. And that is a dangerous place to be in, because then we begin to look at fruitfulness and effectiveness and power the way the world looks at it. What do I mean? So in shops, right, you have bestsellers, or you might have a brand that sells, I don't know, makeup, for example, and they have a bestseller, and we know that this one is continually out of stock. You cannot get it anywhere. Everyone's rushing to make sure that they get it in stores. Stores are wiped out, right? That is the bestseller. In some regards, Mike Pilavachi was a bestseller because he was somebody who was highly regarded in the Church of England community. He was somebody who put on these great events that loads of people came to. Loads of people from across the world, across denominations, across races came to. Externally, he had the appearance of like, this is a fruitful person. This is somebody who is doing great work for the body of Christ. This is our bestseller. And what happens when brands or shops have a bestseller? They do everything in their power to protect that bestseller. So they restock it and restock it and restock it. All the advertising goes to that bestseller. It's on every TikTok ad, it's on the streets, it's on the billboards, because it's the bestseller. However, that often happens at the expense of all the other products. So Mike Pilavachi, I hope this analogy is making sense, but Mike Pilavachi is our bestseller, and it's like everything that he is doing behind the scenes, which I'm sure people knew about, all of his behavior, all of his misconduct, that's all collateral damage, and it doesn't matter because he's our bestseller. He's bringing us in quote unquote profit. He's fruitful. Do you know what I mean? And so everything else that he's doing is just part of, I guess, it's just collateral damage. And I think it's really dangerous for people to start viewing things like that in the body of Christ, because we focus more on appearances as opposed to the private life. And we all know that what happens in public eventually will just be an expression of the private, no matter how good you are at putting on appearances. Yeah. And I also think something that I was thinking about this morning is like, there is a real need for us to challenge our idea of fruitfulness in the body of Christ. It's a techie one, because to the eye, right, he's fruitful. Loads of people came and gave their lives to Christ at Soul Survivor. Loads of people came and met Jesus, which is a beautiful thing. But we cannot associate fruitfulness with numbers or with appearances or looking a particular way, because there's a lot of people who are able to walk the walk and to some extent also talk the talk, but they're lacking in substance and they're lacking in character and integrity. And it's almost like we've substituted character, substance, integrity for crowds and numbers and clout, and that has become our measure of fruitfulness. And not to say that any of those things are bad, because obviously God positions people and all that good stuff, whatever, but that can't be our only measure for fruitfulness, because then we will exalt a lot of people with bad character and we will brush over it because, well, they pull in crowds and they've got, bums on seats, and that's what we need, right? And so, yeah, I just think we just got to revisit, like, what do we consider to be fruitfulness? What do we consider to be the church? Like, why are we treating church like business? Okay, so my second honorable pick, and let's just get into it. Let's get straight into it, because the girls are fighting. The girlies are fighting one another in these streets, and I'm not sure what is going on in the US water. Like, what are they drinking? Because tell a lie, even the UK water, because I saw something the other day about Nella Rose and Annie Drea and Adiola and Mariam have all fallen out or something like that, sure. But the girls are fighting. Like, why is everybody falling out of friendships? this week it was J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar were doing diss track for each other. A couple weeks ago it was Drake and Future. Guys, by the way, like, the word girlies is a gender neutral term, and I say that because if you think about the messiest girl, it's a man. It is a man. The girls are messy. I'm looking at Drake, by the way. Messy little girl. But the girls are fighting, and B. Simone and Megan Ashley are no different. They're no exception to this rule. So I thought there's just a really interesting conversation in here about friendships and about the dissolution of friendships, and kind of something I've already touched on before, but how, when seasons change and when circumstances change and when people change, how it is our duty to update ourselves and to familiarize ourselves with the new versions of our friends that they present to us in this current season. So, but let's just talk about that, should we? So, I don't know if you guys know B. Simone and Megan Ashley. I was a fan of their podcast. They had a podcast together, and I wasn't really even a podcast girly like that, but theirs was one that I really enjoyed because it was a really good mix of like faith, good conversation. I love good conversation, and like, I guess, comedy, pop culture. Like, it was just like, it meshed all of that together, which was really good. And their whole shtick was like, oh, we've been friends for 20 years, and we sort of saw their friendship play out. Literally, like, we if you watch or if you listen to it, they would have difficult conversations. So like, they would have a conflict the day before and they would get on the podcast the next day and have it out. And I just thought that we just don't hear that anywhere. So that was really interesting. But they said, yeah, kaput, kafindle, the thing is done. The friendship of 20 years is finished. The podcast is finished. They didn't explain why. But yeah, it's done, it's over with. That was a few months ago, to be fair, but this week I guess people are now like speculating again because B. Simone has released her own podcast. So Megan started hers like immediately after Know For Sure ended, and hers is very, actually we'll get onto that, but B. Simone dropped the trailer and the first episode for her new podcast, and people were up in arms because she was hella shady in like her trailer, because it follows her coming into the studio and sitting down on the set, and there's 2 seats, and then she's like, I guess she calls like a runner on set, and she's like, excuse me, we're not doing that, can you get rid of the second chair? And everyone was like, oh my god, you can just start your podcast without shading your friend, da, 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 da. And so yeah, they are a very interesting case study for what happens when people grow and people adopt new versions of self, or people mature, and how that can be a real conflict in friendships that have been there before even your current self got there, if that makes sense. So Megan is very, she's really wise, and she has a lot of humility, and she's very teachable, and so she's really gone down like the faith route. So I think she's had Jackie Hill Perry already on her podcast. She had John Bevere on. Guys, I love John Bevere, I love him. But they had a really good conversation. Like, she's doing the whole faith podcast thing, and B. Simone is very entertainment, and she's a comedian, so we know her from like Wild and Out, and she's very court jestery. So I don't actually know what that podcast will look like, but they're worlds apart. And so it's interesting that B. Simone would throw that shade and Megan would not, but then that speaks to who they are as people. And to me, I watch that friendship and I watch what it is now, and I think it's evidence of the fact that they were maybe trying to like fit one another into the new lives that they now lead. I don't know, I look at their friendship and I'm like, this is what happens when you're not willing to accept the new version of your friend who you once knew. Like, you're not accepting of this new version because you don't know it. And B, you're not willing to also be honest with yourself in the fact that you may not be compatible with that new version, because maybe you yourself have not changed and you've not done as much growing as said person. That's not always the case, but I do think a lot of people stay in strained relationships and this is for all types of relationships, but they have resentment towards the other person because they are not honest about the fact that this person has grown and it makes me uncomfortable because I haven't grown. And I think that's what we're seeing here. I do also think that it just is a reminder that friendship is hard work. Friendship is hard work. Seasons change, people change, circumstances change, statuses change. And if you're not willing to do the hard work and say, okay, life update, you're here, I'm now here. How do we come together? How do we now make ourselves compatible again? How do we now adjust to our new way of life as a friendship? If people aren't willing to do that, you're going to chuck people away every 3 years. Like it just is not sustainable for you to not do the work. And I think if the friendship to you is worth it, you will do the hard work no matter how difficult and uncomfortable it is, because it is, it's incredibly difficult. I feel like I'm in that stage now with a lot of my friends where it's like post uni everything changes, because where you and all your friends were like on an equal footing, everyone was on SFE, everyone was just studying to get their degree. Suddenly you come out, one person's on a 40k salary, one person's on 60k, one person's on 20k, one person is single, one person is married, maybe one has a kid, someone's running a business, somebody has stepped out of the faith, someone is now, not only in the faith, they're leading a church. Like, things change, and that equal footing suddenly just gets erupted, and you have to work for those friendships. You have to work to say, okay, we were once here, now you're there and I'm here, still love you. How do we make this work? And people are not willing to do that, and that's why friendships are dissolving in the manner that they are, because one person by society standards gets ahead, right? And then there's jealousy, and then there's resentment, and then there's bitterness, but you're not being honest about it. And so I don't know that any of that has gone down in Megan and B. Simone's relationship. I'm just saying they are a really good case study for watching people evolve in real time, and how, the lack of adjustment to that evolvement finishes things. Like, it finishes relationships that could have had longevity. So a lot to think about there. This was not a personal one, but an interesting one, because like I said, I'm in that phase where like mid early 20s, things move and will continue to move probably for like another 10 years. And it's better that you know it now, Sha, before you get to like 30 and you look around and you're like, where are my friends? Where are my friends? It's because you didn't do the work. But anyway, yeah. Okay, let's do our main story for this week, because, I'm trying to change my confession. I'm trying to change my language, but I do believe everyone is mad. I think everyone's mad. I think everyone, actually not everyone, let me take that back. There's a segment of society that a few cogs are just loose or maybe missing. I'm not too sure, but something's missing upstairs, because, the last week and a half, there's just been the most unwarranted uproar, on social media, because a theatre company have decided to, do an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, and they casted a young black girl in the role of Juliet. And for some reason, we are in a cost of living crisis. Children are being murdered in Gaza. There are, people being, hoodwinked and tricked in the Houses of Parliament, and being tricked by some of their own colleagues into sexual online activity. But it's the fact that they've casted a young black girl as Juliet that is causing you to rise from wherever you are. Everyone's mad. Is that not mad? Anyway, so backstory, if you didn't get it, a theatre company are doing, let me read it actually, because I think also the language they use is really important. But they are doing a run of Romeo and Juliet, and they've called it a pulsating new vision, very important here, of the Shakespeare classic. Now, I don't think this typically would have got the publicity that it did, but because they've casted Tom Holland as Romeo, of course, amazing, that's got like loads of press surrounding it. And then they announced Juliet, and everyone just like melted like a candle. And it's I can't lie, it's horrible. Like, it's terrible, the abuse. I subjected, again, what I said at the start of the episode, I'm not trying to be online too much, because people are wicked. Like, the abuse and the racism and the misogyny that was thrown at her. Like, this is a young, fresh actress, and this is her first West End run. West End, my guy. This is not a small thing. Do you know what I mean? And she has just the most disgusting abuse in her Instagram comments, you know, the most racist. I just can't, it's just terrible. And I think, you know, we'll get into why. Well, I can't say why, because how can you rationalize the way some people think? It's not possible. But, you know, we'll get into the nuances of it. But it's just really horrible to see. I think that's the thing that pains me the most. Like, she was in, I haven't even said her name. That's so terrible. Francesca Amewuda Rivers is her name. I'm so sorry that, like, I've been waffling for like 3 minutes and I haven't said her name. But she was in African Mean Girls, the play, which I'm so upset because I didn't get to see. But she's a young, new actress. This is her first time on the West End. Not only that, she's playing her role beside Tom Holland, who is one of the biggest actors in the world right now. This should be a really special moment for her, but it's been tainted by the fact that people are losing their crap over the fact that she doesn't look like a Juliet. And I think her not looking like a Juliet is also down to the fact that she's not, how do I put this? She is not conventionally attractive to these people, not to me. Let me just make that distinction very clear. But because she's not that slim, she has very African features, she is being considered as not conventionally attractive and therefore not fit for the role of Juliet. I think it's most insane because, and I'm not even like trying to be funny here, but Romeo and Juliet is not real. Like, does everybody understand that Romeo and Juliet is a play? It's not, like, it didn't happen. It's not an account of history. It's not an account of real life events. It is the figment of somebody's imagination. And all this theatre company are doing is reimagining Shakespeare's imagination. It's not real. And, you know, so people are talking about, oh my gosh, they're rewriting history. Oh my gosh, it's inaccurate. What are you talking about? It didn't happen. How can you be writing a history that did not happen? It's I equate it to like somebody being up in arms about the fact that Brandy's version of Cinderella casted a black girl for Cinderella and a Filipino man for Prince Charming or whatever his name was. Like, if somebody genuine, like if someone came online and was like, oh my gosh, why are they why is Cinderella black? Like, why? That's not accurate. This is rewriting my history. This is cultural appropriation. Would you not look at that person and be like, yo, something upstairs is just off, because Cinderella is a character. Cinderella is not real. And that's the way I look at these people who are like, oh my gosh, Juliet is not black. Like, what are you talking about? Cinderella, Juliet, whichever one you want to pick, they're not real people. And so actually what is most important is character. And as long as character does not change, as long as the essence of who they are does not change, how they are presented and how they look aesthetically is open to interpretation. And I'll fight anybody on that. At its core, that's what art is. Like, I'm inspired by your work. Let me take it, twist it, and make it palatable for my context. That's all that art is. That's why sampling is so popular in music, because people love to be inspired by other people's work and immerse it within their own. And so it's just ridiculous that we're all up in arms about this. And this is actually a prime example of snowflakeism. And it's so funny because people will have you to believe that being a snowflake, or, you know, snowflakeism is reserved for younger, you know, more liberal, maybe more ethnic people. But actually there's a generation of like older conservative, I'm not even going to give it a race, but there's a generation of those kind of people who are just as bad. Like, everyone is up in arms about one minute factor, her race. And actually none of the commentary or the comments around this decision to cast her is about, she's a young actress, you know, we actually don't know whether she's talented enough. We don't know if she's capable enough to play alongside Tom Holland. Kind of, you know, those are all somewhat believable comments to make, like they would make sense, but everyone's so hung up on her race, this one minute detail. And I say it's minute because at the end of the day, like I said, has the character been captured in its essence, then that's all that matters. But they don't care about the art. They don't care about, is this going to translate the way Shakespeare would desire or the way the current playwright would desire? They don't care about that. They just care about not wanting to see a black face in what they consider to be white art. It's ridiculous. And so actually they're proving that they are more snowflakey in nature than they think. But yeah, that is that on period, as the kids would say. I have been Feyisara. I've been the host of It's That Deep, the podcast. Thank you for joining me for episode 18. I feel like maybe we celebrate 20. I'm not sure that I have it in me. I'm going to be honest with you guys. But yeah, another episode done. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, let me know your thoughts. Are you going to see Romeo and Juliet? If you are, let me know so I can be a proud hater of you. Proud hater. But yeah, I'll be back next week. As always, you know where to find me: on YouTube, on Spotify. Like, comment, share, subscribe, rate, all of the things. And I will see you next week. So bye bye. I just hit my mic.